gather our minds and our hearts so that we may be prepared to hear your voice. Just as we did earlier in the Epiphany season, we journeyed with Jesus to the accounts of Matthew. We're now journeying with Jesus to the accounts in John. And I'm going to read just to begin with the first 5 verses or so. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. Well, I am the world. I am the light of the world." Jesus and his disciples are walking along, and they come across a man who was blind. Now, we live in a time when we're very blessed. We're very blessed to live in our time. If someone is blind, there are special schools they can go to. If someone becomes blind in their life, there are ways potentially to correct it, but it can't be corrected. There are seeing eye dogs and braille books and all kinds of things that can help people. Even if a person is born blind, there are all kinds of things that can be done. But in Jesus' day, if you were born blind, unless your family was extraordinarily rich, you basically had one choice. You became a beggar. They come across this blind man. He's blind from birth. Now imagine this scene. Jesus is walking with his disciples. They come across this fellow. There he is. He's sitting there, probably with some cup or something, and he's begging for money. And one of the disciples asks, "Teacher, how did this guy get this way? Who sinned? Him or his parents?" Now right away, think about this for a moment. There's already an oddness to that question, isn't there? We're told the man was blind from birth. And yet they ask, well, did he sin? Did he sin to get this way? It seems like an odd question. Look at me, and they can say, well, it's very obvious this guy sinned to get so fat. He eats too much food. Right? This poor guy was blind from birth. And they asked him, did he sin? And that was the prevailing attitude of the culture. In those days. If something went wrong in your life, the assumption was that God doesn't like you. God is angry with you. If your crops failed, God is angry with you. If you got sick, God is angry with you. Conversely, if things went well for you, people thought, oh, God has favored this person. God must really like this person. And is that a whole lot different from our attitude today? We have this sense that God is there. God is there to look down on us. And he's going to reward the good, and he's going to punish the, what? Not so good. Yeah. And Jesus doesn't take very long. To set this attitude at ease. Jesus does a little myth-busting of his own. And Jesus says, right there in verse 3, he gives this answer. It's an answer we may not like because of its implications. The disciples asked, who was the sinner? And Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the work of God may be displayed in his life. And I say we may not like that answer because it implies something. It implies that something is wrong. When something goes wrong in our lives and something goes wrong in the world, that it's neither a punishment, but it's also not random. We can't also just say, well, it just happened. Jesus says right here, this happened why? This happened so that God's glory may be shown in this man's life. Right now, you'd be saying to me, so you mean, Pastor, when something goes wrong in my life, that's how God can be glorified? I don't know like that. But Jesus doesn't leave it there. Please note what Jesus says next. He says in verse 4, as long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Please notice that instruction. As long as it is day, he's now addressing his disciples, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And I submit to you, know this is true today. When we see suffering, when we see prejudice, when we see hurt, when we see violence, that has come so that God may be glorified. And who are the ones who are going to correct it? Who are the ones who are going to fix it? Who are the ones who are going to heal it? The answer, those who are the body of Christ. For we who are in Christ are now the light of the world. Please look at 2 Corinthians 5, 20 through 21, please. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf. Be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Because of Christ. Because of Christ. We are now in him. We are now God's righteousness. And we must bring about healing, which is to come in the world. So, we're back to John now. We're back to John, chapter 9, verse 6. Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with his saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him. Wash in the pool of Siloam. The word was sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus put some mud in my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" I asked him. "I don't know." We see that Jesus now has healed this man. He said to his disciples, okay, this guy is not a particular sinner. He's not being punished by God. His parents aren't being punished by God. Instead, this happened so that he may glorify God. And Jesus goes ahead and makes some mud, applies to the man's eyes, and he tells him, go ahead and go to this pool in town, a place called Siloam, and wash it off, wash the mud off. He washes it off, and all of a sudden you can see. And what happens? Almost immediately, the camp is divided. You have a few people who recognize this, and they say, wow, this is the guy who used to beg. I used to pass him all the time. He'd sit there with his cup. Remember when something like that in the city of New York? You don't see him so much anymore. Anybody here used to work in New York or still works in New York? Back in the old days? Yeah, remember all the guys sitting on the street corner? I remember when I was going to school, there was one guy who played the accordion. He played this beat up, nasty old accordion. And he had a cup. There was a cup kind of welded to the accordion or epoxy to it or something. And he would be there just day in and day out. And I remember everybody knew the guy. He really couldn't play very well. But he was there every day. And people would put coins in his cup. And he just wasn't there anymore. You know, I still listen. People saw this fellow, they knew he used to beg, and a few of them said, wow, this is great. But a whole lot of other people did what? A whole lot of other people met this. They met this this authentic grace of God, and they said, it can't be. It's a fraud. They accused this man of being somebody else. They said he's an imposter. He just looks like one. Pardon the bad pun, he's trying to pull the wool over our eyes. This is what we do. We meet the grace of God. We meet the grace of God, and we say it can't be. There's no way. It's got to be a trick. There's got to be something false here. Someone is trying to pull the wool over my eyes. 1 John 4:20, it's page 1841. I'd like to try to extrapolate something here. See if this makes any sense to you. 1 John 4:20, second column of 1841, towards the top of the page. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. Did you catch that? Okay. You say you love God, but you hate your brother. And then, well, John here asks, well, how can you love God whom you really haven't seen? You haven't seen God directly. Both people haven't, I think. And you haven't seen God, you love God, but you've seen your brother and you hate your brother. How can this be? And I submit to you a similar principle at play here in the story. How can you say you believe in God? You believe in God, you believe in God's grace, yet something you would actually see. The evidence of grace in God's life, you disbelieve that. The people believed that the man could not change. Those are blindness, and it's pretty hard to change blindness. But we too are like that. Have you ever known somebody really bad? Besides me. Have you ever known somebody really bad? Somebody you don't want to be around? Somebody you don't like? Someone who's done bad things? And then they change. Maybe they say they got religion. They believe in God. At least they don't believe in doing the things they used to do. How do people believe that? Very frequently, disbelief. Have you ever heard this? Have you ever said to yourself, people don't change. People can't change. Either you are or you aren't. Now you begin to understand. These people saw this man begging every day from childhood. He's blind from birth. And when he changed, they couldn't believe it. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now, the day on which Jesus made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. You get the sense that the man may have been tired of telling the story after a while. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. Let me just read that again. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. So, the blind man comes to the attention of the Pharisees. Comes to the attention of the church. There's a miracle that's been done, or so the people say. There's a miracle that's been done, and they want to know about it. So they haul him off, the seat of authority. They haul him off to the government. The government to have him checked out. And the government is not impressed. The government is not impressed with him, nor are they impressed with his healing. You see, the man who did the healing didn't do it right. He didn't follow